Welcome to the Tourpreneur Podcast. Travel industry veteran Shane Whaley will take you on a journey with fellow tourpreneurs, sharing their tips, ideas, insights, and success stories to inspire you to make your tour business the best it can be. And now, here is your host, Shane Whaley.
And welcome to episode 92 of the Tourpreneur Podcast. Robert Levitt in the south of France. How are you?
Good morning, Shane. How are you?
I'm really excited to share your story because you posted on our Facebook group. I woke up over the weekend to a flurry of likes and excitement and positivity because you had posted about a tour that you had led either that day or the previous day in Nice, France. But before we get into that, because I really want to share how you've adapted to the conditions there in France. Take us back to the start of the lockdown and when COVID hit. How did that look for you?
For us, I was in Geneva trying to organize some Jewish heritage tours in the north of Italy when I became aware of what was going on. So up until that point, which was mid-February, I thought COVID was just something that occurred, in China. And being in Italy, still I was sensitized to the issue. Then we had the big issues around the Arrival conference in Berlin, which I planned to go to, and then the discussion about whether it was canceled. It was canceled, but I decided to go anyway. I had already bought the plane ticket, and I had the hotel, and I had several other meetings in Berlin. But one was really important to us because it was a specialized tour agency focused on European Jewish heritage. And this relationship was real important because they were sending us more and more and more very high-end clients. And not only were all the meetings in Berlin eventually canceled, but a week later we got an email from this agency that said that they were shutting their business after 20 years. So for us, it was like, back to the starting gates because we've only been around since 2018 and we worked really hard to build up some of these relationships. And now all of a sudden they were ended, and then we found ourselves in a lockdown. So we were in full confinement here in France for almost 2 months, where we were limited to leaving our house just half a kilometer from where we lived. That was all we could go, and we had to bring with us a form that was specifying why we were leaving the house, et cetera, et cetera. So it was not a very optimistic situation when we started.
And the company that went under, the one that had been around for 2 decades, was that COVID related or?
Well, I believe what they had done is they had taken a lot of deposits and things like this. They worked a lot with the cruise ships, and they were going to be forced to refund everything. And I don't know if they could afford to do that, maintain their staff, et cetera, et cetera. So they shut down completely.
Wow. I mean, it's just staggering to me that so early on, because I was the same as you. I hate myself for this, Robert, but when all the news came of COVID, I thought, well, this is really sad, but it's happening over there, as they say in German, dort drüben. It's not happening here. And then now you look around with everybody in masks and I can't even get my hair cut right now. And that was something, you'd said to me that you were surprised by the reaction of your Facebook post on the weekend. I said, yeah, because here we're still in we're starting to come out of lockdown. Like you can eat outdoors, but there's a load of restrictions that come with that just make it very unwieldy for a business. So for us to see you leading a tour, is hugely exciting. It's the first chink of light that we've seen. Can you talk to us about how you adapted to the rules that were placed on you in France?
Well, we have there were a number of rules on us, and we knew we wanted to go out and do something because we knew there was an interest of people to explore because they couldn't go anywhere. There's a restriction in France that you could only go 100 kilometers from your house. So we decided we were going to do a tour, and we were going to do it socially distancing. So we were going to maintain a distance between the individuals. We were going to require everyone to wear face masks. Everyone had to provide to us in advance a document which proved that they lived within 100 kilometers of Nice. Mm-hmm. We brought with us hand sanitizers. We had to restrict the number of participants in the group because there was no congregation of more than 10 people. So that included for us the translator and the interpreter. And then, of course, put a face mask on a speaker and nobody can hear them, right? And then, of course, put the distance, spread out, also an issue. So we we needed some kind of system.
Did you know every weekday Shane curates the most interesting news articles in tours and activities and sends them out in a snappy daily digest? Grab your copy of the Tourpreneur Daily Briefing at www.tourpreneur.com.
So everyone had to prove that they lived within 100 kilometers. And this was, we were concerned because it was the first visit that was being done. We were a group. We were going to be obviously very visible to the police. And we were concerned that we would be controlled. We would be checked on to see what we were doing and why we were doing it. So if we didn't have these documents, if we relied on the participants to bring them with them, well, we would have no assurance that, that they would have done the right thing. And that probably would have ended up with us being fined. And so we had everyone deliver them to us by email in advance. So the documents to prove where they lived was with us. When we had it one time, we had our guide who was going to distribute some documents. So he made sure he used the hand sanitizer before he touched the documents and provided them to all the individuals. We were limited by the number of participants because in France, the current regulation said you can only have congregations of up to 10 people. And that would include, in our case, both the guide and an interpreter. And then, of course, if you're wearing a mask, how does anybody hear you? It's very difficult. So you have people covering their face at the same time, keeping a distance. So we had to have a system of communication. So we didn't want to provide our normal system of communication because then we had all kinds of issues about the disinfecting it in the proper way or whatever that would be. So we asked all the participants to download an application. In this case, it was the Unity application. So they could bring their own phone, their own earphones, so they could listen to the presentation. And in this way, everybody was sort of safe in a sanitary way. Yeah,
no, it's a really good idea. So they get the Unity apps. You tell them to download it. They have it on their phone. They're using their equipment and they're listening to the guide through that app.
That's right. And because we are doing it in multiple languages, they can listen in either French or English.
Oh, that's cool. Wow. What's the costs for you for utilizing that app?
Well, at this point, we're still sort of in the test process. So there has not been any cost assessed to us. But it's not perfect. Look, it's not perfect because there are certain areas we're walking through the old city and there's certain areas where the network is just not good. And of course, it's dependent on the network. And the other thing about this app is people that are living in the area, they're going to have a local telephone. So they're going to have 4G access. But if you are coming from Australia or from America or someplace else, you probably don't have a telephone with access to the to the network. So therefore, it may not work very well for a foreign visitor.
But you are targeting, obviously, because of the 100-kilometer radius, you're targeting locals. How did you go about promoting your tours to locals in the area?
Well, there's a couple things about designing local tours because they're not the same as if you were dealing with a foreigner who doesn't have the knowledge. I mean, it's almost like if you have a restaurant here in the countryside of France, it's designed for the locals, and if it's no good, the locals aren't going to come. So we also have to design in a local tour something that's going to be far, far deeper into the culture and the history of Nice, which in our case plays to our strengths because our organization is made up of historians and archivists and linguists. So we are able to do that. But if the presentation would not have been good enough, if we would have made mistakes, if there were questions that we didn't answer, our credibility can very quickly be hurt. So we're targeting people who have lived here, some of them that were on our tour more than 10 years, maybe more than 20 years. And we had to be able to find a whole sort of new series of visions and ideas, kind of like the niche you never knew. And this was kind of a challenge because if we couldn't attract their attention very, very quickly, we would not be doing any more tours in the future. So the other thing that was very important for us is that it was a bilingual tour. If we did a tour in English, and all the people that we were advertising to, promoting to, communicating to, we were communicating in English. But if we were an English-speaking tour to local residents, we would have kind of lost credibility because someone who's lived here for 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, they're normally going to be able to speak French. And they're going to prefer to hear the presentation in French because the depth of the vocabulary of the speakers are going to be far greater if they're a native French-speaking person than if they tried to make the presentation in English. But actually, we didn't even have a choice because our speakers, while they're very strong in their technical background, they don't speak English. So we had to go with the bilingual approach.
How did you market to locals? This is a big change for you, right?
The marketing was very quick because we posted on our Facebook site and we posted on an English-speaking Facebook site. So basically a Facebook site that's read by some 10 or 20,000 English speakers in the region. And in this case, it filled up very, very quickly. And it has to, because, in Facebook, if you're going to be seen at the top of the page for an hour or two, not more, right, before you kind of fade away. So that's how we advertised it. We were looking to fill basically 8 places because we had a speaker interpreter. We had room for 8 more, and we had over 40 requests within basically a couple of hours, which continued. Wow. For the next sort of 48 hours, we ended up with more than 40 people that wanted to go on the first visit.
That's fantastic. Congratulations, Robert.
So there's clearly a lot of people that are very focused on activities because they have nothing to do. They can't go, they can't leave, they can't, and they've been stuck in their houses for 2 months. So they're very anxious to turn their sights towards the local activities or the local market or the local things to do. And now there are other people that are, focusing on, what do we do? This is the staycation era. And there are people are looking for suggestions of each town of what people can do because people are looking for activities, in the local region.
Yeah, and we're going to be focusing on this a fair bit on the show because, everyone's talked to death about virtual tours. And now we're hopefully coming out of lockdown across the world. I keep seeing encouraging news from all over the world. Who knows? And maybe even our governor will let me go and have my hair cut this week,
Well, he may let you, but I'm not sure you want to, right?
No, I do want to. I do. I look like I'm a hippie right now. Nothing wrong with hippies, but it's not my look. No, I really want to get my hair cut. But that's just an example of how cooped up we are and these basic things we can't do. And also, living in the state of Vermont, I've not really done anything locally. I traveled to Berlin and hit all the museums and attractions, but I've not really done much locally. Or I'll drive up to Montreal from here, but now I need to go and do things in my own state. So the challenge is for those tour operators here in Vermont is they need to market to me. So you were very smart getting on Facebook. I presume you'll be doing some Facebook ads, etc.
We will boost from time to time a post that we do for like 15 euros or something like that. But it's not necessarily something that's important to us. But look, there's a couple of things that's just really, really important besides bringing in people or besides the obvious. And this is that we have a team of people, and if they're not working, and I'm not saying working for money, I'm saying working at all, because they get depressed, and the group of people that we have, they love to be in front of people. They feed off of the energy of making presentations. And when when it's showtime, they're on. And this is so important because when they had this couple of months of just being at home, you could tell that people were getting depressed on our team. And as soon as they were out there, it was like everything was forgotten. They were in the limelight. They were in the show, they were in the show, the lights again. And this kind of thing, I think, was really important for the energy of the group. And also, once we started doing activity, the phone starts to ring. And then we find that people are asking us not just for tours, but for other kinds of experiences, whether they just want to go off and take a hike with, a group of friends and they need someone to take them or whatever. This, they see that we're active. They see that we're in business. And if you go in and you look at sort of the competitors that used to be our competitors, their websites will say, due to COVID-19, we are closed. So for the moment, we have the market to ourselves, which is a fantastic place to be. Even though ultimately we're not going to make a lot of money on the local market, we find that the local market at some point when their friends come from overseas, they're going to be looking at us. And our particular product is normally a private groups, and it's quite expensive. We need to dominate our market. We need to be seen as the best player in the market. And this is giving us an opportunity to do that I can't believe, because we are the show. So when we did our visit, we had 2 journalists that came with us and a photographer. So we got press locally, we got press internationally, and this kind of publicity you can't pay for. It's really helps us build our network. And this is, for us, this is sort of the name of the game. You have to build a network. But it also gave us a chance to sort of break into the old boys network. I'm American originally. So I'm not, wasn't born here, didn't go to school with all the, the local functionaries, the local bureaucrats in the city of Nice and the Office of Tourism, which have always had kind of an in that I didn't have before. But this is kind of reversing now, because we're out there, we're promoting, we're taking these restrictions and we're not complaining about them, but we're actually implementing them and using them in a successful way. So we're building our relationship with the city of Nice, with the Office of Tourism, in a way that would have been very, very time consuming, or would have taken years to do otherwise. Maybe we never could have done it. So there's so many side benefits to this kind of thing. And then we're asking all the people that attend our tours now, because we had not collected recommendations for Google. So we're in turn asking them to give us Google recommendations. So, it's just like, there's just like a win-win-win on all sides for operating in this environment.
Yeah, and that's very smart what you've done with the media there, because I think it's a good lesson for all of us, for tourpreneurs out there that are starting to lead tours. The press are hungry for success, for positive stories right now. There are 2 months of very negative headlines. They're looking for positive. They're looking for signs that the economy is, I don't want to use the word getting back to normal, because we're a long way off that, but there are green shoots of recovery. Whereas in the past, tour operators may be struggling to get any press attention. I'm pretty sure now, if you're the first one in your city or your town to be doing this, the press are going to be interested. So don't be scared of emailing the local editor or the newsroom and saying, hey, we're leading our first tour on Saturday, because they'd probably send a photographer as well. I think that's very smart of you, Robert.
Yes, this is, because the angle that the reporter from our local paper is called Nice Matin, but the angle that they were looking at was, how are people reacting, and how are they operating under COVID-19 and living in Nice, which is a tourism town. I mean, in fact, tourism was born in Nice. This was the first town of tourism. So it's really, really important. And so to be able to see how somebody's operating within the confinements of the federal government's laws, but still running activities, was very attractive to the press.
How do you mean first town of tourism? Well, in France, or?
No, Nice is the beginning of tourism in the world. I mean, it all began here in the 18th century. Before Nice, there was tourism. It wasn't tourism. There was pilgrimage, there was religious, and there was people traveling for business. But there weren't people that were traveling for leisure. And that all began in the 18th century, and it began here in Nice. So this was the beginning of what we call the berceau of tourism in the world. And at one point, Nice was sort of the center of the world, where all of the aristocracy from all around Europe would spend the winter here.
There you go. I've learned something today, Robert.
Yes, it's quite an interesting place with huge potential, like most places. But you have to adapt to your situation. Obviously, the situation here in Nice is going to be very different from the situation in another city, whether it's Paris or Milan or in Vermont. Everybody's got their own strengths and their own weaknesses. But I think your point was really that showing the press and showing the local government as well, in our case, that you can do it, you can operate, and you can be successful even under the constraints, I think is a very good feel-good story that everybody's looking for.
Definitely. What was the reaction of the guests after the tour?
Well, the reaction was interesting, because they gave the same kind of reaction they might have given if we had done sort of like a local-based tour in January. Their reaction was, wow, we learned all kinds of new things, but they didn't even really focus on the fact that they were wearing masks, or it was kind of like forgotten. They didn't even think about it. It just became sort of normal, the new normal, natural, that they would go through. But I will tell you that as we walked through the old town of Nice, the merchants there were applauding the group. They were applauding us because this was the first group of tourists. Now, they didn't understand that these were people that actually lived in the city, but they were applauding the fact that there was a tour going on because, they were so hungry for tourism, and to see it was happening was making everybody happy.
I salute you, and I thank you for sharing that on our Facebook group, because I know we were kind of joking, or you were like, I'm surprised at how positively this has been received. But everyone in the tour industry looks at that and says, wow, that's a little bit of normality. Yes, your guests were wearing masks and everything else, but here's a tour that's being led. It's not a virtual tour. It's not an online experience. This is what we all love doing. And I think you've given, like I said, every country is different right now, right? We have different laws and restrictions and circumstances, but you gave a lot of people hope this weekend, sir.
Well, I tell you, what happened was people that were on the tour then told their friends, who are now joining the next tour, which we're doing on Friday. So it spreads, and I think it can only be a win-win for everybody, but particularly I think for Via Nizza and us as a tour operator.
Great. Well, keep sharing the photos with us. I know you got a lot of fans now on the Facebook group and in the tourpreneur community.
Thank you very much, Shane.
Thanks for listening to the Tourpreneur podcast. Be sure to visit tourpreneur.com to join the conversation and access the show notes, including links to the resources mentioned on today's episode. This is Tourpreneur.